Welcome to the Sports Card Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Big Ken. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on a streaming service, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I drop any new content. Welcome and thanks for being here. First things first, I only set up Saturday at the Fenway show. It was a 2-day show. It was Saturday and Sunday. I only set up on Saturday. I had some family things going on Sunday and had to give up my Sunday table and family first, right? I apologize if anyone showed up Sunday looking for me and I wasn't there, but I was there Saturday. I did see a ton of people. So let's get into it. This is one of those shows, the Fenway show, that, making plans for this show, the plan that I had set in place on Monday, this past Monday, completely changed twice before Friday, before the show even started. Things had changed. It started out, I was driving and setting up alone this weekend for 2 days. Then Wednesday, Rob, sports card therapist, calls. He says his plans changed and he was able to attend the show. So we were going to split my table. Then Friday, he gets a call from someone who can't make the show on Saturday and offers him his Saturday table. So now I'm back to having a full table. And then some family stuff came up for me. Now I'm only end up going to be there Saturday. So these are all the things that change. Usually, when I make these plans for these shows, they don't change. They're pretty much set in stone weeks and weeks before. And this was just one of those shows that things kept changing and changing before the show actually even got here. And I talked, last week, you have to make inventory choices, when you're setting up for the show. So if a whole table versus a half table. So, I was prepared. I set things up for a 6-foot table. And then Rob was coming. I was going to cut it down to 3 feet, started changing things around a little bit. Then last minute, I'm back to a 6-foot table again and, putting stuff, back together again. So I kind of, pulled things apart and put them back together a couple times, which is really not bad. I somehow I seem to enjoy doing that. And I'm always like changing things up all the time at the last minute. So on Saturday morning, Rob met me 5:10 a.m. and we were off to Fenway. Dealer setup. Doors were opening at 7. We arrived exactly at 7 o'clock. I think it was 6:59. And we pulled up and parked in the street. And there was already a line of people waiting to get in. And I'm going to start off by saying my first impressions from the time I arrived, we pulled up, until the time the show started were a little negative. I'm going to honestly say that. Things changed along the way, but I'm going to say, I talk about, how I'm feeling, what's going on in my mind. And this is it. I showed up, there was a line to get in and 6:59, 7 came, 7:03, 7:05, 7:10. And then all of a sudden I saw the gate open and I said, okay, so we're just 10 minutes late standing out here in the street with our carts, waiting to get in. And then next thing you know, somebody's coming around and they're telling you to open up your boxes and your cases. They want to look in. I said, wait, what? I mean, look at these people. Look at everybody's got this stuff, all, And then it turned into, by the time he got to us, it was just our black card cases, our Zion boxes, and whatever else, because I had 2 big plastic. I talk about my plastic bins, right? I actually had 3 plastic bins because I had some wax with me too. And all he wanted to do. So I had to unpack my cart to get my Zion box out, to open it up to show him my cards in my Zion box so he could put a sticker on it to say that it had been inspected. So I just kind of shaking my head, things will get better, breathe. So we got in, got checked in. There were, which I thought there wasn't going to be, because all the people I was talking to about the parking, they said they had set up on they came and set up on Friday, and they already had their free parking passes. And I know in the email it said they were very limited, and I thought to myself, there's probably not going to be many left for Saturday morning, the parking passes. But I was wrong. There were parking passes available. So after we rolled the carts inside, I had to go grab the car and then go park it, find the parking area, and then walk back to the show. So when I get to my table, and they sent a design of the setup, and it was funny because a couple of times I looked at it and I thought to myself, what are these things? They had these like squares within our square. There were these squares, and one was like right behind where my table was. So when I arrived, I realized it was this big cement block with this pillar in it that was holding up the bleachers, right? Because the show, um well, I'll get into that in a minute. But anyways, between my table and this big cement block, there was 2 feet, literally 2 feet. And I was like, how am I going to even maneuver behind this thing? And the person on the other side of that block had the same problem as I did, but nobody else in the block. I just had to be the unlucky one to get this seats, get this table. So what I did, because there were the other people that were set up next to us, their stuff was already like there, but they weren't there. They hadn't actually set their tables up yet. There was just carts there and stuff, wrapped up. So I proceeded to go pull my table out till I had enough room, and then I pulled everybody else's table out to match, so nobody knew that I was pulled out. And and I'll say that's one of those dealer hacks that Rob and I, when we go to any show, when you get there early or you're there before your neighbors, if you need to slide some tables to give yourself a little extra room, you can without people really noticing, right? So if you show up late and people are already setting their stuff up, you can't start saying, hey, can you move your table? But when these tables have nothing on them, we can kind of pull them out or slide them over just to give ourselves a little bit of room if we need to. So definitely one of the reasons we like to show up early, or as early as we can. So the venue itself was basically, it was outside, but under the bleachers, right? And, one of the things that kept going through my mind all day was, and when I say bleachers, I just don't want you to think it's like I'm looking up and seeing like the sky. There was cement, it was all cement above us. But looking forward, it was all wide open. I could see right outside. Looking straight ahead, I could see outside. And if I turned around, because the field was actually behind me, if I turned around, there was the walkways to go into the field on the opposite side. So the area we were in is where if you were at the game and you wanted to go use the bathroom or buy a beer or soda or some popcorn or whatever, this is the area. This was the kind of runway that runs around the whole stadium. And that's where the show was there. So they were calling for heavy rain on Saturday. And I thought to myself, I'm just looking at the setup is if it starts raining, these floors are the water is just going to run in here. That was my thought, that this is what's going to happen. And I also thought that, people weren't going to want to come out in the rain if they knew this was kind of an outside venue in the rain, because they had 3 sections set up for this, and you had to walk through the rain to get to each section. And I think there may have been a way, if you kind of stay close on one side, that you didn't have to. But even if you wanted, like when I wanted to go get some food, I had to actually walk outside in the rain to get and it was only maybe 30 or 40 feet away from me, but I had to walk through the rain to get it. And I do want to say, in my own defense, about my negativity is I reached out to a number of people who did this show last year, and I said I was gonna, reach out to people and just get as much information as I can, kind of because I don't know the show, but maybe they know it. I can get information from them. And last year it was inside. So the information I was getting, people were saying, last year it was inside, the room wasn't big enough to hold all these tables. So they knew wasn't going to be the same. It was going to be somewhere in that stadium, but not in the same area it was last year. So, I got some information, but I probably had no more information than they had. Um, and the way my table was set up, and I will say this now, I complained about this cement pillar being behind me. But I was one of the areas that when the water did come in later in the day when it was raining, that it took almost till 4 o'clock or 4:30 until the floor around me got damp, where I know to my left and my right, you could see the water on the floor probably, like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, you could see the water there. But where we were, we stayed pretty dry, so it was probably a benefit. I mean, in our whole square stayed dry. So maybe I didn't need this cement block right behind me, right? But it was a benefit being in the area where we're in because we stayed pretty dry. Even the stuff on the floor stayed pretty dry the whole day. Um, and it was probably good Rob ended up with his own table because I don't know how the two of us would have fit between this table and that pillar and in this little area that we had because there was really nowhere else, like, for me just to even walk out there. Like people had their carts and their boxes and it was kind of going through a maze if you had to go to the bathroom or get out of there. Um so just seeing all this when I showed up, I was just shaking my head like, oh, this is going to be a long day here. um But I was wrong. I was wrong. I mean, once this show got going, man, did it just got going. It was busy. Um, and I was asking people because I knew it extended a good ways around the building that I hadn't gotten to. Um, uh, a lot of the people I asked, the attendees, I said, "How is the show? I mean, have you been to the other side? What do you see?" And a number of them, they complimented the setup, saying there was just a nice flow that when you came in, you could just start on one end and just go all the way down and then come all the way back to this end. And I couldn't honestly agree or disagree because when that show was crowded from when those doors opened at 9 a.m. till they closed at 5 p.m. I never got time, to walk around. I talk about having time to walk around and do some shopping. And in the morning, I wasn't able to because, I said we got in there late. We really didn't get in, probably didn't really get to start setting up my table till about 7:45. By the time I was done, it was probably 8:15, 8:20. I kinda walked around, I knew some people, I visited with a couple people, I'm looking in some cases, and I looked at and it was 9:01, and 'cause I could just, all of a sudden it was starting to get louder, and I kinda looked back at my table, and I saw there was a whole bunch of people around. I'm like, "Oh my god, the show's already started." Um so I didn't have a chance to walk around the show. I just did not have a chance to do any shopping at all, or even to go see, how well it was being traveled on the other side because our side was just so busy. I never The only time I left was to go to the bathroom. Um, and it was a great show for me. I sold mostly football. I think this is it. I think now, football is back into prime swing now. I sold mostly football graded and stuff from my 5 row box I talked about last week, putting that together. That was a hit. I sold a lot of stuff out of that 5 row box. Um, and I was pretty excited to sell a lot of non-sports cards. Probably sold more non-sports cards at this show than I've sold at any other show, and probably almost combined, right? And I've been carrying a lot of non-sports stuff. You guys, if you've seen the videos, I've graded a lot of music cards. I've graded a lot of Pop Century cards. Um, things like that. And yeah, I was excited that, I was excited that they were selling. Um, I'm gonna jump into a quick story from the show, and then we'll talk about the inventory I was selling. But right at the beginning of the show, one of the first kids that came up to my table was like a 12-year-old kid. Uh, he came up, he saw I had a Trevor Lawrence autographed, no huddle, PSA 9. And he was like, "Oh," he's looking at the card. He goes, "Oh, that's my dream card. That's my grail card." He said, "Can I see the card?" So I took the card out, and he's looking at it, and he goes, "Okay, I have some good trade stuff." And he pulled some cards out. He had some decent cards, but nothing I was interested in. Um, I said, "No," and he says, "Okay." He says, "I'm gonna go sell these cards, and I'm gonna come back." So he came back like 3 more times, and each time he came back with better cards, and the 3rd time he came back, he said, "I have these cards, I have some cash now." He had basketball cards, he had baseball cards. They were great cards, but I don't do anything with that. I don't do anything with basketball, baseball, and I said, "I really don't." I said, "These are great cards, though." I said, "I'm sure you could sell these cards." Um, and he said, "Okay." He said, "But could you just do me a huge favor? Don't sell this card until I come back." I said, "Okay, I agree. I won't sell it till you come back." I said, "I'll be here all day." And football was selling. There was a lot. I was selling a lot of football cards, and I was almost had a feeling I might have broken the kid's heart, if I would have sold the card. But about 30 minutes later, he came back to the table. He had a smile on his face, and he says, and I quote, "I'm prepared to make an all cash offer on the Trevor Lawrence card." I started laughing. Uh, and I thought to myself, man, it didn't matter what his offer was as long as he was close, because, we're about 3 hours into the show. And I know this kid was just working on this card, and he kept coming back to make sure I had the card. And at that time, you feel, yeah, it's like 12 years old, right? You feel like I'm dealing with a real sharp businessman, because a lot of these kids, they can really, they can really work at these shows. Uh, and it was looking great until, I accepted his offer, and he reaches into his pocket, and he just throws a pile of crinkled up money on my case. And I'm looking, and there's a guy behind him, and I thought it was his dad at first, and he was laughing. I was laughing. I said, "Oh, okay, well, let's count this up." And they were all like just crushed up hundreds, 50s, 20s. And he actually had $40 more than what he offered for the card that I accepted. And he looked at me, I looked at him, I said, "No, that 40 is yours." And I took the card out, and I handed him the card, and the kid was just beaming. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me when I went to the Toronto show back in April, and I saw the Mike Tyson card, and I, went around, and I was moving cards at that show, and he was able to do it in a few hours. For this card, it took me over a day to do it, to get my Mike Tyson. But I kind of felt like I knew his feeling. I knew what he was feeling when he was finally able to accomplish getting this card. Um, for a kid his age, I mean, I don't know how long he'll have that card, but the reward was worth the work he put in for it that day. Um, and hands down, it was my favorite sale of the day. Uh, the music cards that I was selling, the music cards were hot. I had Taylor Swift card that was probably one of the hottest cards in my case. And of course, Taylor Swift was playing this weekend at Gillette Stadium. Um, and with the music cards, not so much the musician themselves, but the cards themselves, where they came from, what they were in, and what the population is on these cards. So, when I sell something, I like to have as much knowledge as I can. So on these cards, I've really picked up a lot of knowledge on the cards even before I even bought them or sent them out to grading. I had a lot of knowledge on them, and I've set up at shows, and people have kind of looked at it, and I've started like maybe even talking about it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's nice." They weren't really interested in the card, and here I was trying to tell my story and pass my knowledge on, and nobody was really interested. So this weekend was a little different. People were stopping, they were asking questions. They were asking me those questions that of the knowledge that I had, that I was happy to start sharing it with them and talk about these cards. And it was fun for me. It was fun for me to be able to, not only sell these cards, but be able to talk about these cards. The Taylor Swift cards sold to people that were attending that concert that night, Saturday night. So excited to have it. Um, I had some Game of Thrones cards, and a guy had come up he's been collecting them for a while, but he's really gotten serious into it now. He really wanted to collect them, and he came up, and I had a number of cards, and he said, "Can we make a deal on all of them?" Of course we can, and he bought them. Really excited, right? I even had some wrestling cards that I didn't even have room on my table or in my cases for, but I did bring them, and I had them on a little stand next to me, and I had the top off. And the reason I had it off is because I had two soccer cards, and somebody said, "Do you have any more soccer cards?" I said, "Yeah," and I just reached in that box and I handed him the cards and let him go through. So the top was off, and I think the guy had saw one of the wrestling cards there, and he said, "I'm interested in wrestling. Do you have any?" I said, "Oh, of course I do." Put them out. He bought like half the pack, or the half of those cards. I probably handed him 15 cards. I think he bought probably 7 or 8 of those wrestling cards. So just this non-sports things that you go to. This show's 2 hours away, right? And I travel to New Jersey, to New York, to Long Island. I do the local shows in Connecticut, and there hasn't been a lot of interest in a lot of these cards. There just hasn't been. People have looked at them. They thought they were great. I know last week, when I drove up to the Flippin' Card Show, and I had that Taylor Swift card out in front. How many people picked up that card and handled that card? You just held that card and wanted that card, and but nobody ever bought the card. That was the most interest that I really had, that I saw in any of the music cards that I had, um, until this weekend. Uh, there was a lot of interest, and even these American Pie cards that I bought, and I graded a bunch of the cards. People love these cards. They were buying these cards. Um, so it was great just to be in a different market, in a different place, and all of a sudden that case with all the non-sports, the pop culture cards were as hot as my case of football. So who would know? I mean, sometimes I think that I'm on the right path, but I was just a little early, right? I think this non-sports pop culture stuff, I think, is just me, and this is certainly not a pump and dump, but I just think that they're on the up and coming, and I'm excited to be on the ground floor, and hopefully it'll keep up and it'll keep momentum. Uh, because I kind of like that lane. I need something a little more than football, and I really enjoy that stuff. So I'm really hoping that um, it can hold up in the market, that people, that there's an interest for it, because I really enjoy selling it. I saw so many familiar faces at this show, but I saw a ton of new ones too, and that a lot of people coming up, say, "Hey, I listen to the podcast," and introducing themselves. Just love that. Love being able to, people from all over that one way or another found this podcast and started listening, and took the time to come introduce themselves and meet me. Really, really excited about that. Um, Shout out to my man Jason, my old neighbor. If you remember, if you've been around since season one, he was my neighbor before I moved at the Cardboard Collaborative. He seems to find his way to all these shows. Always good to see him, and he came bearing gifts this weekend. Um, he uh, he brought me, and I'm going to hold it up here, Prism, Lisa Leslie autographed card. So I was excited about that. he found it somewhere. He had a card show and knew I was collecting that and brought it to me. So I really appreciate that. Definitely a huge shout out to him. Shout out to my man Tom at Kirill _ recognize _ real. So if you follow the comments from the last episode where I talked about buying some Sue Bird cards off of Neil, in the episode I referred to one of the Sue Bird cards as a rookie card. So Tom commented, said, either you got bamboozled or you misspoke. and I responded. I said, "Oh, I misspoke if I called it a rookie. My apologies." And I know Tom and I are good friends, and I know Tom knew the card because he owns the true rookie card. He has it in his case, and I've seen it in his case a time or two. So after this weekend, I now own the Sue Bird rookie card. This is it right here. And this one is graded BGS 9. And yeah, Tom, we have, made a trade and I was able to acquire this card. So I was excited about that. Thanks for letting that one go, Tom. And a shout out, Brian, not on social media, listener of the podcast, stopped by the table to introduce himself. Just a really great guy, active military, who has just done a ton of research about the history of the hobby itself. And after our short conversation, I realized he had such a wealth of information about the part of this hobby itself that, I mean, I don't know and really much about, and I just don't know how many people do. And he was asking me if I knew of any podcasts, that just dealt with just the history of the hobby, and I didn't. So if anybody out there does, throw something in the comments. And Brian, if you need, I know you're not on social media, and we talked a little bit, not a lot, and you left, and hit me up. You can, I know you can. I'm sure you have access to email. You can send me an email at sportscardlessons at gmail.com. Definitely send me an email. I definitely want to keep in touch, keep that conversation going. Shout out to all the listeners and hobby friends that came by to see me. Just always a good time to see people at card shows. And it's even Neil, who I met last week, was back again this week, and it just becomes so great that you talk about things with people and then they show up and they, me being a teacher, I mean, I know I make a great student too, but I love when people come to me with information, especially on things that I'm interested in. Right. And, he came back, he was at the show. I saw him at the show the week before, and then he was back at this show, and he had brought some cards that we talked about. He brought some cards to share with me and things like that. Just a great, just love setting up at this shows, love meeting people and seeing people. People really make these shows great. At the completion of the show, I had to walk in the pouring rain to get my car and drive it back and to load up in the pouring rain and then drive 2 hours back home. And at that point, my hobby day did not end there. As I talked about on Thursday's episode, I was on Sports Cards Live with Jeremy Lee Saturday night. So that ran from 10 to 11:30. And I appreciate all the listeners here that were there watching. I could see so many familiar names coming through the chat. So I definitely appreciate the support on that. And that, if you missed that and you want to go back and see it, Sports Cards Live with Jeremy Lee, it's on YouTube. You can go back and check that out. It is there. Last thing before I go, one of the things I've been playing with is rating the shows. It's become this thing where I'm breaking all the shows down and talking about them. And I've also often thought, should I rate the show? Should I rank the shows? So I said, I'll leave that up to the listeners. That's something you'd want to see or hear, or maybe something we could have fun with, right? Just so if you have any opinion on it, leave a comment. Should I start rating some shows, and what scale would we suggest? 1 to 5 stars, 2 thumbs up, be creative. Let me know what you think. That's all I have for you now. I will be back Thursday with a brand new episode. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And if you like what you hear, please definitely subscribe. And most importantly, tell a friend and spread the word. And until next time, take care of yourselves and everyone around you.